Morning Coffee by XNav. The Smart Marketer Talk.
Okay, let's talk about something that still feels a bit mysterious, even in 2026. The dark web. You hear the term, maybe you picture spy movies, hackers in hoodies. It's definitely got this reputation. Companies fear it. Fiction dramatizes it.
That's exactly right. And that reputation, while partly earned, often obscures the reality. It's become this big, scary thing in headlines.
So that's what we're doing today, right? Getting past the hype.
Precisely. This deep dive is about clarity, not sensationalism. We want you, if you're a creator, a journalist, maybe managing a brand here in the US, to understand what the dark web actually is today.
And crucially, why it matters, why it poses risks, but also how to think about it safely and ethically.
Exactly. It's about understanding the landscape, the real risks, the legal and ethical guardrails, and maybe even legitimate places to learn if your work involves research or journalism. Knowledge, not fear.
All right, let's start at the beginning then. We need a solid definition.
Sure.
People often confuse dark web and deep web. Can we clear that up first? What are we actually talking about in 2026?
Good question. So technically, the dark web refers to specific parts of the internet that aren't indexed by, Google or Bing. You need special tools to get there.
Like the Tor browser, that kind of thing.
Yeah, Tor is the most well-known example. Or certain network configurations. But honestly, that technical definition, it doesn't really capture the practical reality, which is what matters for risk.
Okay, so what is the practical reality? Because the image is often just, wall-to-wall crime.
Right, and that's the myth we need to tackle. Practically speaking, it's a mixed ecosystem. Yes, absolutely. You find illegal marketplaces selling drugs, weapons, stolen data. You find forums where breaches are leaked. That part is real.
But it's not only that.
No, definitely not. You also have legitimate uses. Things like very secure, privacy-focused communication channels. Think about journalists in oppressive countries needing to talk safely.
Right.
Or researchers who are specifically studying those criminal markets. They need to observe them. And various communities focused on privacy or specific types of research.
So being aware of it isn't illegal. Accessing it isn't automatically a crime.
Correct. Just knowing about it, or even technically accessing parts of it, isn't illegal in the US. The line gets crossed when there's intent to commit a crime, buying illegal goods, accessing child exploitation material, trafficking stolen data. That's where the serious legal issues come in.
Got it. So reality is mixed, but the press often focuses on the worst stuff. How do we, as informed people, separate the scary headlines from the actual situation? Where can we find reliable info?
That's key. You need to ground your understanding in reputable sources, not just random blogs or sensational news. For legitimate learning, your first stop should be official reports.
Like from government agencies?
Yes. Look at the annual threat assessments from CISA. That's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Check out FBI cyber alerts. They often detail trends they're seeing.
And universities too, I imagine.
Absolutely. Many universities have dedicated cybersecurity research centers publishing solid, data-driven work. Stick to accredited security reporting. That's your safe starting point for real knowledge.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Build from a credible foundation. Now, let's talk motive. Why would legitimate folks, researchers, journalists, even go near this stuff? What's the pull?
Well, for researchers, the motive is often understanding the enemy, so to speak. They study how criminal markets work, how threat actors operate, track disinformation campaigns at their source.
To fight it better, presumably.
Exactly. For journalists or, say, privacy advocates, it might be about secure communication that can't be easily monitored. Or maybe they're investigating wrongdoing, like a whistleblower leak that needs that extra layer of anonymity you just can't get on the regular internet.
So for certain investigations, it's almost an unavoidable source.
For some specific kinds, yes. Especially those looking into global cybercrime or certain types of illicit trade. It's where some primary evidence first appears.
Now, this is where I think it gets really crucial for maybe our listeners running businesses or managing brands. Why should they care? Why does some hidden forum matter to a mainstream American company?
Because the barrier isn't as solid as people think. What happens in these hidden spaces? It very often spills out into the mainstream and quickly.
Spills out how?
We're talking major data breaches first appearing there. Stolen customer credentials, logins, passwords being bought and sold. Your company's intellectual property might show up. Sensitive PII, personally identifiable information. All of that becomes a real-world business risk.
So it doesn't stay contained?
Not at all. The problem leaks out, and it can hit businesses hard and fast.
How fast are we talking? If say my company's customer logins appear on one of these forums, how quickly do I need to worry?
The timeline is frankly terrifying. It can be incredibly rapid. For a business managing user data or a valuable brand, if there's a confirmed leak on a significant underground forum, you could be facing a major operational problem within 24 to 72 hours.
Like what kind of problem?
Think ransomware attacks using those stolen credentials. Think competitors getting hold of your leaked IP. Think regulatory fines for the data exposure itself.
Wow. Can you give us a sense, maybe a statistic, on how often that follow-through happens?
Yeah, there was a recent threat assessment I saw. It suggested something like nearly 60%, 60, of small to mid-sized businesses that had credentials pop up on a known sort of top-tier leak forum. They saw follow-up attacks like ransomware or extortion attempts within 48 hours.
48 hours, that's almost immediate.
It's relentless. The speed is a huge factor in the risk.
Okay, that really lands the urgency. So if I'm that business owner worried about my brand, my customer data, my IP, what's the immediate proactive takeaway? What should I be doing now?
Proactive defense is everything. Don't wait for the news cycle to tell you you've been breached. You need to be subscribing to reputable, ideally US-based threat intelligence feeds.
Services that look for this stuff.
Yes, services that monitor for mentions of your brand, your key executives' names, maybe specific product names or code snippets related to your intellectual property, and set up breach monitoring alerts specifically for those terms.
Got it. Okay, so the risks are real, they're fast. Let's talk about the dangers of maybe someone getting curious and just deciding to poke around. Without the right setup, you mentioned risks fall into three main buckets.
That's right. I tend to categorize them as legal, financial, and psychological, and all three are serious.
Let's break those down. Legal first.
Okay, legally. Even if your intent feels like legitimate research, just interacting in the wrong way can be disastrous. If you try to buy stolen data to see if it's real, or if you accidentally facilitate an illegal transaction, or even ask questions that make you look like a participant. Yeah, you or your organization could face actual criminal liability, conspiracy charges, violating computer fraud acts. It gets heavy very fast.
And financially, beyond the obvious cost of a data breach itself.
Financially, well, scams are absolutely rampant in these spaces. People lose money trying to buy things that don't exist or services that are fraudulent. And then there's the massive cost of ransomware, often demanded in cryptocurrency, sometimes sourced or laundered through channels related to the dark web. Globally, that's billions of dollars.
Okay, legal, financial, and the third one, psychological.
Yeah.
That one feels less tangible, maybe.
It's less tangible, but incredibly important and often completely overlooked. Think about what exists in the darkest corners, truly disturbing illicit material. Exposure to that can be genuinely traumatic.
I can only imagine.
And even beyond the most extreme content, just spending time in environments driven by intense paranoia, disinformation threats, it can really mess with your head. It can be misleading. It can affect your judgment, your mental well-being. It's a real occupational hazard for those who have to be there.
So just being curious, try to be a digital tourist. It's not just a technical risk. It's a legal minefield, a financial pitfall, and potentially psychologically damaging.
Absolutely. And critically, in the US legal system, simply saying, oh, I was just researching or I was writing a story, that is not a get-out-of-jail-free card, not even close.
So what separates illegal activity from legitimate research in the eyes of the law?
Institutional oversight. That's the absolute key differentiator. Legitimate research doesn't happen in a vacuum. It requires a formal framework.
Like what?
Like being affiliated with a recognized institution, a university, a news organization, a proper research firm, having written protocols detailing exactly what you're doing and why, getting review and sign-off from legal counsel, and often approval from an ethics review board.
So lone wolves are basically asking for trouble.
Pretty much. If you're a journalist or a researcher considering anything that touches this space, you should never try it alone. Partner with your newsroom's legal team, work with your university's research ethics board, get that institutional backing first.
That sets a really high standard. So for an investigative team that does have that backing, how do they operate safely? What's on their checklist to avoid those legal and ethical traps?
It's less about finding some magical technical shortcut and more about having the right organizational and legal structure. The toolkit is procedural.
Can you give examples?
Sure. It involves getting explicit institutional approval for the project, detailed legal consultation, especially understanding jurisdictional issues, having clear safety protocols for the team members, and this is critical, maintaining meticulous forensic chains of custody for any data or material they collect.
Chain of custody, meaning they have to prove exactly where it came from and that they didn't tamper with it.
Precisely. If it ever ends up in court, or even just in a published report, they need to be able to demonstrate the integrity of that evidence.
So it sounds like legitimate players are actually trying not to directly interact with the bad stuff if they can help it.
That's often the goal, yes. They actively try to avoid direct engagement with illegal marketplaces if possible. They coordinate closely with their legal departments. They use techniques to anonymize their digital footprint, sanitize data they collect.
And rely on others sometimes.
Often, yes. They might work with certified forensic labs or subscribe to professional third-party threat intelligence services to get verified information or context about leaks, rather than diving in themselves. They leverage partners who already have the legal and technical safeguards built in.
Okay, let's make it super practical. I'm a reporter. I get a tip, maybe a USB drive with potentially sensitive data that seems to have come from the dark web. What is the absolute first, most critical step I must take?
Before you even think about plugging that drive in or analyzing the data, get editorial and legal sign-off from your institution. Full stop.
No exception.
No exceptions. You need that institutional cover.
Yeah?
And then you must use the approved institutional resources like secure labs or IT security teams to actually handle, verify, and store that sensitive material. It protects you personally, and it protects the integrity of your potential story or evidence.
Okay. That's a very clear warning about the dangers of DIY investigation. Let's pull back again to the everyday. For the average creator, the typical business owner, what should they be doing right now to shield themselves from that spillover risk, the stuff leaking out?
Right, this is about basic digital hygiene. It's the foundation for everyone, regardless of whether you'd ever dream of using Tor. There are, I'd say, 5 essential, mostly non-technical steps.
Lay them on us. Number 1.
Strong, unique passwords for everything. And use a reputable password manager to handle them. Don't reuse passwords across different sites. That's just asking for trouble if one site gets breached.
Makes sense. Number 2.
Enforce multi-factor authentication MFA or two-factor authentication wherever possible, especially on critical accounts. Email, banking, cloud storage, social media admin panels. Make it mandatory for your employees if you run a business.
MFA feels like one of the single biggest security bangs for your buck, doesn't it?
It absolutely is. It stops so many automated attacks that rely solely on stolen passwords. Okay, number 3. Use reputable vendors for breach monitoring or so-called dark web scanning.
But clarify that, what are these vendors actually doing?
Good point. These legitimate services are monitoring publicly known leaked data sets, huge dumps of credentials that surface after breaches. They check if your company domains or email addresses appear in those known leaks. They are not typically logging into active illegal forms themselves. That's an important distinction.
Okay, number 4.
Regular tested backups. And keep your software updated, patch everything promptly. So much ransomware works by exploiting known vulnerabilities in outdated software. Backups are your safety net if the worst happens.
And number 5, often called the weakest link.
The human element, employee training, social engineering, phishing emails, scam phone calls is still the most common way attackers get initial access. Regular awareness training is crucial.
And for businesses in the US, doing these 5 things isn't just good practice, it's also about avoiding legal trouble.
Right.
Compliance.
Definitely. Data protection isn't just an IT issue, it's a legal exposure issue. You've got frameworks like SHIPA for health data, PCI DSS for payment cards, various state laws like the CCPA in California regarding consumer data rights. Failing to take reasonable steps to protect data can lead to hefty fines and lawsuits.
So if you had to pick one core protective measure from that list for immediate action,
implement MFA everywhere you possibly can right now. If you run a business, add quarterly phishing simulation tests for your staff, and sign up for a verified breach alert service. Those are high-impact first steps.
okay, let's talk about the bigger picture, the legal and ethical landscape around this in 2026. Are things getting clearer? Is law enforcement catching up?
There's definite progress. You
Yeah.
see much better coordination now between U.S. agencies. CISA and the FBI, for instance, are publishing joint guidance, threat advisories, incident response playbooks. That helps standardize approaches.
And internationally.
Yeah.
Because this stuff is global.
International cooperation has improved, too. There have been some significant takedowns of major dark web marketplaces in recent years, resulting from multi-country law enforcement efforts. So, yes, progress. But
There's always a but.
Yeah, we have to be realistic. The law almost always lags behind technology. New marketplaces pop up, new techniques emerge. There will always be gaps and challenges.
What about transparency? We sometimes hear about companies trying to hide a breach versus those that come clean. Does being transparent actually help, legally or reputationally?
Oh, enormously, on both fronts. Organizations that report breaches promptly follow the required notification laws, which vary state by state. By the way, they generally fare much, much better than companies caught trying to cover things up.
The cover-up makes it worse.
Almost always. It destroys trust, invites harsher regulatory scrutiny, and often leads to bigger financial penalties and more damaging lawsuits down the line. Transparency, while painful up front, is usually the better long-term strategy.
And shifting to the ethical side, particularly for researchers or journalists operating near this space, what's the core ethical principle they need to keep front and center?
It really boils down to two things. Informed consent whenever possible, and above all, minimizing harm.
Minimizing harm seems key.
It is. The crucial question you must constantly ask yourself during an investigation is, who could potentially be harmed by this work or by publishing this information?
Harmed how?
It could be harm to vulnerable sources, re-victimizing people whose data was leaked, inadvertently tipping off criminals, endangering communities. If you identify a potential for harm, you absolutely need a concrete plan to mitigate that risk before you proceed. Ethics isn't an afterthought, it's integral to the process.
So for the business owners listening, maybe their legal teams,
Yeah.
what's the final takeaway regarding law and ethics in this area?
Engage your legal counsel early and often. Don't wait for a crisis. And specifically, make sure you understand the mandatory breach disclosure laws that apply to your business in every single U.S. state where you have customers or operate. They are not uniform, and compliance is non-negotiable for managing risk.
Okay, let's say someone listening is really intrigued by this field. Maybe they want to become a cybersecurity analyst or an investigative journalist focusing on these areas, or a researcher. They want to move beyond just basic awareness. What's the right way to gain expertise?
The right way involves accredited, structured learning within an institutional context. Don't try to teach yourself by just diving in.
So where should they look?
Look for reputable university cybersecurity programs, degrees, or certificate courses. Check out professional training bodies like CERT or the SANS Institute. They offer specialized courses. CISA also provides excellent resources and training materials, often for free.
What about for journalists specifically?
For journalists, look for established investigative journalism fellowships or organizations like IRE, Investigative Reporters and Editors, that offer training specifically on handling leaked data safely, legally, and ethically. But the absolute key, no matter the path, is that learning must be paired with mentorship and institutional affiliation. Trying to be a lone ranger in this field is incredibly dangerous. Partnership provides protection and oversight.
That makes total sense. Professionalism and partnership over DIY heroism. And for brands who are maybe feeling a bit anxious after this conversation, what's your top recommendation for them?
Don't panic, but do prepare. Hire a certified, reputable cybersecurity firm for ongoing monitoring and advice. Subscribe to professional threat intelligence services that are tailored to your specific industry and risks.
And the most important thing,
Build and test a detailed incident response plan now, before anything happens. Know who to call, what steps to take, how you'll communicate internally and externally if a breach occurs. That preparation is your best defense.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what's the final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the main theme is that curiosity about the digital world, even its darker corners, can be a superpower. It drives learning and innovation. But that curiosity needs guardrails.
Knowledge versus recklessness.
Exactly. Understanding the landscape and the risks of the dark web helps protect you and your organization. Just sort of dabbling in it or ignoring the spillover, that exposes you to serious danger. So the advice is simple. Be curious, yes, but be ethical and be legal.
Protect yourself, protect your data, protect your community by learning from the right sources and building the right partnerships.
Couldn't say it better myself.
So if you're managing a brand or handling user data, maybe your final 3 steps after listening today are: look into a certified cybersecurity basics course. Check out Salsa's website for their free resources and alerts, and schedule that meeting with your legal counsel to discuss your incident response plan.
Sound advice. Knowledge protects. Recklessness exposes. Keep that curiosity sharp, but always make sure your defenses, your protocols, and your partnerships are stronger.